Hi, Blastpop here. Today I'm looking at the classic war game by Mark Herman called Peloponnesian War, published by GMT. This was originally published approximately in 1981 by Victory Games. This is the latest edition to appear of the game. I always felt that it was a classic game that was ripe to be reprinted by somebody. Mark has taken the time now to go through it, add a couple scenarios, enhance it. Basically, the second edition is a deluxe edition. Comes with a mounted board, thick counters, strategy matrices that instead of being on pieces of cardstock are now essentially on counter stock. It's included in a fairly large box. It's about 2.5 inches thick. Seems a little bit thicker than your normal GMT style game. It's also a nuclear box in that it can withstand quite a bit of knocking, and so I tend to call it a nuclear resistant box anyway. The back cover shows you what's the history is of the campaign, along with some pertinent information, and this is primarily a solitaire game with a 2-player option. So it does have a high suitability for solitaire purposes. It's got a medium-high complexity rating because it uses some scenario and not so much scenario, but design functionality that's different than what some people may be accustomed to. It weighs in with a rules booklet, a playbook, a mounted 22 by 34 inch map, 2 counter sheets, a pad of victory point record sheets, an Athenian and a Spartan strategy matrix, 2 player aid cards, and 2 6-sided dice. And the playtime is not terribly long. I think it's probably 3 to 4 hours, probably, maybe quicker once you are more familiar with the game mechanics. So that's the box. Also included, handy dandy baggies, 2d6, red for the Spartan and green for the Delian, or otherwise known as the Athenian League, color appropriate. You have a rules book, which also is not all rules. It has the cover and the gazetteer, so it weighs in at about 24 pages all told. The rules have been rewritten by Chad Jensen, who's known for extremely concise and clear and precise rules writing. I think the first edition of the rules weren't as good as they could have been, and with the number of years that the game has been played and Chad's expertise, the rules now are look to be quite clear. Starts off with your introduction, the game pieces, the player aids, the fact that you need draw cups to draw out leaders during the course of the game. Game terms, glossary essentially, game overview. This is nice, a Peloponnesian War campaign game setup, so it explains to you everything that is needed to set up a game and how it's done and in what particular order. Kind of reminds me of War of the Ring by Ares Games in terms of a picture of the map, components, where they're set up, and the setup for the particular pieces. Very nicely done. Determining victory, how you win the game, your sequence of play, political phase, planning phase, and it follows essentially the order of play. Your operations phase, where you actually is the meat and the heart of the game, where the units actually move on the board, and you alternate between the 2 players. In this game, you alternate yourself also potentially from turn to turn by, in fact, going and possibly being the Athenian and then possibly the Spartan, depending on the situation. You're trying to do the best you can and try to win, but if you do too good, you then and don't win, then you have to go play the other side. So you're constantly trying to find the right, you're min-maxing in such a way to try to actually win the game as one of the two sides. It's a player win, not so much a side win. Okay. You have continuing operations. You got the cause rebellion strategy, neutrals, interception, skirmishes, battles going home. The combat phase, you have battles for null battles, which are essentially the forces can't fight each other. In other words, like a naval force fighting a force of hoplites, as an example, which is a land force. You can also have a naval battle, a land battle, and then a naval battle that which, if the winning side has at least as many strength points as the defender, the battle then moves into a phase 2 from the naval into a land battle. You have siege resolution. Going home, basically you kind of clean up the map, and the charts tell you where to place your forces at the end of the turn that weren't lost in combat. And then from there, you go into a rebellion expansion phase, and then you have an administrative phase where you collect your income from revenue, and then you add forces to the game. You can have an armistice and surrender. An armistice will happen at a point when I believe you roll a die, and I think you roll at least 6, and there's some modifiers to that, and then it becomes a number of turns after that where you just basically collect your income and build your forces until you go back to war and hopefully decide the game. The game is potentially 10 turns long, and you also have your index here. The strategy matrices, which I alluded to, they are basically counter sheets that are on die cut. It's basically the same material as the counter sheets, and you cross-index the non-player's force, or the side that you're not playing at that particular time in the game, with a die roll in certain situations to determine what it is you're going to be doing during that phase for them, for the non-player. Then you have your strategy confidence, and your bellicosity track. And the similar situation for the Spartan as well here. It looks similar. Obviously, the tables for the strategies are going to be different based on the objectives and where they're attempting to conquer and such. The counter sheets are the thick counters. They're fairly thick. They're the plug counters in that they are individually plug cut, and they seem to be very nice. Although they seem actually holding this one particular counter seems like it's a little thinner than the actual sheet feels, which is unusual, but very nicely done. Obviously, it's the same thickness. You got your various forces. You got your individual strength points. You got your siege markers. Backside is printed as well. The green is the Athenian. The reds forces are the Spartans. And the lighter version is the allies of the respective major powers. So these are Spartan minor allies. This is Athenian or Delian League minor allies. Game has leaders, and they're rated for strategic and a tactical rating. And I'll give the original sheet here another look at so you can take a closer look at your leisure. You can feel free to pause the video at any time. This is the back side. Then you get 2 player aid summaries, one with a sequence of play and resolutions, so you don't necessarily have to refer to the rules quite so often, and it does index to what section of the rules if you want to look at it a little further to make sure you fully understand what it is you're attempting to do in the game. Then you have your post-combat, which is basically your once you go from the going home box where units are moved to after certain battles and at the end of certain actions, it tells you where and how they are redeployed to the map. And then you have events, your random events table. Keeping track of your victory points. Got a pad of several victory point record sheets. You need one per game, so there's quite a few games here, and they're back printed as well. Further, you have the playbook. This is an all-encompassing tome, so to speak, that comes in at 48 pages. Nicely illustrated again. There's color lavishly used, and then, so for instance, you want to play there's scenarios. You got the Peloponnesian War, you got the Archimedean War, the Diocletian War, the fall of Athens, the first Peloponnesian War, and the fall of Sparta. One of these scenarios, which I don't recall, is actually intended as a two-player scenario. Again, it follows a similar format. The maps show your illustrations, your setup of your forces. An event table for the first Peloponnesian War. And then you have the history. And also a scenario overview for this fall of Sparta. And then another event table, your two-player rules for those so inclined. An example of play, which is highly recommended that you follow the first time out, because the mechanics, while you read the rules, seem easy enough. The actual implementation may be a little less obvious. It's more of a three-dimensional thought process as opposed to the reading of the rules and thinking you understand it in a two-dimensional sort of way. So this gives you a way to understand what it is that's going on in the game. And I have to agree, it's recommended that you would do so. It's been quite some years since I've actually played the first edition, so I may just follow through with this just to reacquaint myself with it. And again, it's a long illustrated example. A look at strategy, which is always a nice thing. So you kind of know what to do, although there's a certain value and interest in trying to figure it out yourself. But we try to make the game what it is to all people, for everybody. Your history of the wars, what went on. Are your games going to be similarly tracked and run similar, or are your games going to be different? Be interesting to find out. Will they depart from history? The economics of the war. The naval war. The game is history. War data article about, or charts about the naval battles that occurred. Chronology. So, and then the designer's notes and the update to include the second edition changes. And that's the end of the rules book. Now the rule map is, I think, a lot better and generally easier to look at it for a longer period of time than the original rules. Although I do have one relatively minor complaint, and I'll explain that momentarily. The board is nicely mounted, lies flat. Over here, there's victory point tracks to keep track of what's going on in the game. You have a map inset here for the southern boot of Italy and Sicily. The going home box, to which I alluded before. The red areas are those areas which are controlled by the Spartans to begin with. Yellows are neutral areas. Green is the Delian League or the Athenian League. And then up in the upper right-hand corner of the map, we have the turn record track with a maximum of 10 turns. Very nicely done. I think GMT went out of their way to produce such a nice looking product. And I look forward to playing this several times in the near future. If you'd like me to do a video on the gameplay, I just may do that. Please comment if you'd like to see something along those lines. But I may do it anyway. Anyway, please like, comment, and subscribe. This has been Blastpop's look at the new Peloponnesian War. Bye.